Actually, Jake, I've decided to work at your company.
I was back home after a long time with my wife and kids. Since mom passed away, my dad seemed downcast. Watching him revive his spirits while playing with his grandchildren was comforting. But then he dropped this surprising news. Financially, he's not struggling. He's been enjoying hobbies like hiking and made friends through volunteering. I couldn't grasp why he, well past 60, wanted to start working again. Growing up, Dad was always busy, so there aren't many memories of us spending time together as a family. However, he's always felt guilty for not spending time with us and our mom. Truth be told, as we siblings grew up, we started valuing time with friends, lovers, and eventually, our own families more than with our dad. He once shared with Mom his plans to go hiking together after retiring at 65. That's when I discovered they met in a college hiking club and began dating. But just before realizing that dream, Mom passed away. At her funeral, he kept repeating, "I'm so sorry." It broke my heart. He seemed to age overnight. Especially after retirement, he seemed like a mere shadow of himself. He's mostly been staying at home, not even turning on the TV and just zoning out. If we don't prompt him, he even forgets to eat. I live in Chicago for work, so I couldn't easily check on him in New York. My two brothers live in the East Coast region, but aren't close enough to drop by often due to their own families and commitments. There are often stories of spouses passing away shortly after their partner. I feared Dad would follow suit. Things changed about a year after Mom's death. He got introduced to a senior hiking group at his favorite diner. This rejuvenated him as he took up activities like chess and volunteering. Seeing this, I felt truly relieved and happy. "Why work now? You're not in financial need." I hinted at my disagreement, but he responded, "I want to start fresh. We won't cross paths. I'll be at the New York head office, you're in the Chicago branch, right?" I realized I couldn't change his mind and just hoped he wouldn't push himself too hard. On his first day at work, I got a call from Jason, who works at the head office. He is my close friend from my batch and someone who knew my dad. He also came to my mom's funeral. I had informed him about my dad joining the head office.
Hey, Thompson was complaining, saying, "Why hire an old, useless guy?"
The rumor must have been so widespread that it reached Jason, who works in a different department, suggesting that Thompson must have said some pretty harsh things about my dad. Thompson is a senior when I was at the New York office. He had always burdened me with chores and scolded me unjustly. Despite his antagonism, I worked hard and was acknowledged by other seniors and bosses. Consequently, I rapidly climbed the corporate ladder and now serve as the deputy director of the Chicago branch. Thompson, on the other hand, remained stuck due to his tendency to dump work on others. Given this, Thompson had always been hostile towards me. Having mentioned my dad to the department heads, I assume Thompson got the message and took a jab at my dad. This made me fear Thompson might make things hard for my dad. Since my father joined the company, every week I'd call him up and ask, "Dad, are you doing okay at work? Nobody is giving you a hard time or harassing you, right? Jake, are you treating me like a kid? I've worked for companies until retirement. Whatever happens, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it." He'd laugh it off. He added, "Even if someone says something, I don't want to cause trouble at the new company I've joined. Just let it be." Then, one day,
"I'm on a business trip to the Chicago branch. Let's grab a drink after work."
I received a call from Jason. After finishing work, We met in the lobby and I took Jason to a local bar. Although I'm originally from New York, I've now grown quite fond of Chicago's renowned deep dish pizzas and hot dogs. This bar had amazing deep-fried cheese sticks, and occasionally, I'd stop by after work for a drink.
This is delicious. Chicago sure has some great food.
Munching on a cheese stick, I remembered bringing my parents here when they visited Chicago.
Chicago food is so tasty. Wish they had such places in New York.
The image of my mom enjoying her meal popped into my mind, and I had to quickly gulp down my beer to stop my eyes from watering. We chatted about work and family, and when things calmed down, I asked Jason, "Is my father doing okay at the headquarters?" Jason hesitated for a moment. That was a sign that the news wasn't good.
I don't have all the details since I'm in a different department, but it seems like he's being harassed by Thompson almost every day.
The nature of the harassment was exactly what I'd faced in my younger days. Trivial tasks dumped on him, sarcastic remarks, and even unwarranted yelling for mistakes even if they weren't my dad's fault.
Just the other day, Thompson told him, let the newbie clean the floors, and he actually made him do it.
My blood boiled. My dad was a senior executive. It was infuriating to imagine him being bullied by a mediocre senior employee like Thompson. My anger wasn't directed just at Thompson, but also at the colleagues who allowed such behavior. I'm going to talk to the head office. I was in a bind. I decided to intervene. The following Monday morning, I was at the main office building. I stormed into my dad's department, but he wasn't there. As I stood there in disbelief, Thompson approached with a smug grin.
Your dad's absent without leave. Not only he is incompetent at his job, he lacks basic common sense too. A loser like him as a father means you're a loser too.
It seemed like Thompson was trying to demean me by bringing my dad into it. Before I could respond, a stern voice echoed from behind me.
That sounds more like you, Thompson.
I turned around to see my dad standing tall.
What?
Thompson tried to retort but was lost for words. That's because my father was not alone there. He was with company's top executives, including the CEO.
We've been informed of all your wrongdoings.
Thompson realized the jig was up and sank to his knees. He had colluded with manufacturers to falsify the quality of the products the company was selling. A colleague from the same department had noticed, but Thompson had silenced him with threats. The CEO instructed for Thompson and the silenced employee to be escorted to a conference room for further discussion. I looked up at my dad and laughed. Did you join my company for this? My dad, a certified public accountant who worked at an audit firm before retiring. He was an expert in auditing.
Foster believed it was probably Thompson who faked the quality, but even an internal audit couldn't nail down definitive evidence. So I decided to look into it.
Finally, it made sense to me why he would want to work after retirement age. But I was surprised to hear Dad referring to the CEO as Foster. Did they know each other? Later on, Thompson was let go from the company. The employees who were forced into silence, not by choice but out of intimidation, were spared from disciplinary action because they had cooperated with my father's investigation. That evening, my dad took me to his favorite diner. As we walked in, there was the CEO.
Hey, is that you, Don?
The CEO's friendly and informal tone made it seem like they were more than just acquaintances. Sitting across from CEO Foster and sipping some bourbon, the CEO spoke with deep gratitude to my dad.
Thanks to you, Don, our company was saved. I can't thank you enough.
My dad told the CEO that it's okay and then smiled.
It's me who should be thanking Foster. I owe you big time.
Seeing my puzzled look, he then shared how he met CEO Foster. Ever since Mom passed, my dad had been living off grocery store meals and takeout. He grew tired of it and stumbled upon this diner. The home-style cooking reminded him of Mom's dishes, so he started coming here every night. Many regulars, like my dad, loved this place. One of them was CEO Foster. With shared interests like bourbon, casual greetings turned into deeper conversations. Before long, they became close friends, sharing their personal circumstances with each other.
After I retired, I looked forward to hiking with my wife. But she passed, and I kept regretting not taking her hiking sooner.
Why not join my senior hiking group? While it won't replace hiking with your wife, I think she would be happy seeing you lively and active.
To which CEO Foster suggested. Initially hesitant, CEO Foster convinced my dad to join him on a hike the following week.
The beauty of nature is unparalleled. From the summit, all the weight on my heart felt cleansed, realizing how small we truly are.
He was inspired and he decided to join the hiking group. And on weekends, he would go hiking in various mountains with CEO Foster and their club friends. Many in the group, including CEO Foster, had lost their loved ones.
Seeing them lead bright, strong lives motivated me to move forward too.
Soon after, Dad took up chess, something he always wanted to do, and attended classes. Wanting to give back, he volunteered in community cleanups and read to kids at the local library. One day, CEO Foster shared concerns about possible internal fraud in the company. My dad, who had no intention to work again, decided to help his friend. He revealed his past experience at an auditing firm and offered to work as an employee to investigate. Initially hesitant, CEO Foster accepted after realizing the severity of the situation. It was then that my dad realized that he was the CEO of my company.
Who would have thought we'd be connected like this?
The three of us shared a laugh. It's funny how life connects us in mysterious ways. Currently, my dad works part-time, 2 days a week. I once suggested he could retire since he had done his part, but he joked, "My presence keeps the others in line." In reality, he seems to enjoy his work. On weekends, he goes hiking with CEO Foster, and during the week, he plays chess or volunteers. He's busier than I am.
My life is just beginning.
Seeing my dad's vigor, I felt a renewed drive. I can't let him outdo me after all. When I was 5 years old, my father passed away in an accident. Ever since then, it was my mother who raised my sister and me, all on her own. However, my mother also passed away from illness when I was 18. Since then, my sister and I have been living by relying on each other and getting help from our relatives. My sister, 2 years younger than me, is cheerful, friendly, kind to everyone, and always surrounded by people. Even after graduating from high school and starting to work, I was often cheered up by my sister's warm personality. My sister got married when she was 24. She married her boyfriend whom she had been dating since high school, and a year later, they were blessed with a daughter named Hannah. Despite being tossed around by childcare, she was always looking forward to documenting Hannah's growth with her camera, which was her hobby. On the other hand, I had a girlfriend in high school, but we quickly broke up. I'm shy and slow to make a move, so even if I'm interested in a woman, I can't bring myself to approach her. And since then, I've had a hard time finding a girlfriend. After graduating from high school and starting to work, I was busy dealing with the tasks at hand. Perhaps because of that, I am now able to enjoy my work at the current company. Let's just say I haven't had a girlfriend because I haven't had good luck so far. I work at a company that deals with baby products, and I'm involved in the development of new products in the product development department. When I first joined the company, I was assigned to the sales department. I used to visit the stores of our company's main clients, study our products, and work hard to contribute to the sales. However, after Hannah was born, I started thinking about what I could do to make childcare a little easier. Around that time, there was a competition within the company to solicit ideas for new products, and I decided to apply, and I was surprised to win. I got involved in the development as is, and I learned the joy and difficulty of manufacturing. I wanted to be more involved, so I requested a transfer to the product development department, and that's where I am now. For a while after transferring to the product development department, I was often working overtime due to unfamiliar tasks. The person who kindly supported me during that time was a female employee named Samantha, who was 2 years younger. Despite her younger age, Samantha is a respected figure in the product development department. She was involved in the development of a portable baby chair, which has now become a hit product of the company, and she even received the President's Award that year. Despite her achievements, Samantha, who is capable of detailed consideration for others, has many secret fans not only in the department but also in the company. Actually, I also secretly admire her, but with my personality, of course, I haven't been able to make a move. For me, my current pleasure is to see my niece Hannah. My sister and her husband live in a suburb relatively close to the house where I live alone. Worried about me, who tends to be casual about my diet when I'm alone, my sister often contacted me to come over for dinner. My sister and her husband, who always welcomed me warmly. Hannah, who was initially shy and cried when she saw me, has completely warmed up to me as she has grown. Wanting to see Hannah's happy face, I enjoy visiting my sister's house with donuts that she loves and little toys as gifts. To my sister, who looks apologetically and says, "You didn't have to bring anything," I smile and reply, "It's a pleasure for me." The time spent with Hannah's smile and interacting with my sister and her husband is precious to me. My sister used to say that she wanted me to experience the joy of having a family. Because you're so shy, I'll introduce you to someone next time. I already have someone in mind, she used to say enthusiastically. But I had no idea at the time that such a thing would happen before that promise was fulfilled. That day the weather was bad, and it had been pouring rain since morning. As usual, I went to work and was attending a department meeting from 10 a.m. There was a call on my office cell phone from the General Affairs Department, and when I moved from the conference room to the hallway to answer it, "Can I connect you to a call from the police?" I was told. Wondering what had happened, I nervously had them connect me. I was told that my sister and her husband had been in a car accident and that they were in a critical condition and unconscious, and I was asked to come to the hospital immediately. I was in a state of shock from the sudden news and rushed to the hospital. My sister had been talking about wanting to go out and buy a surprise gift for Hannah's upcoming 5th birthday. I had received a message in the morning saying that they were going to buy it together because they both managed to take a day off, even though I had offered to take out my car. Perhaps the unfamiliar driving and the poor visibility due to the rain that had been falling since morning had caused the accident. I prayed as I headed to the hospital to see my sister and her husband. When I arrived at the hospital, It was too late for my sister and her husband, who would never open their eyes again. I couldn't accept the sight in front of me, with the image of the two smiling faces that I had just seen a few days ago deeply etched in my mind. Next to me, a little girl named Hannah, brought here by a relative, was crying.
Mama. Papa? What's happened? Why won't they wake up?
I didn't know what to say to Hannah, who was letting large tears spill over her cheeks. All I could do was hug her. After my sister and her husband's funeral was over, the gathered relatives began to discuss who would take care of Hannah.
She's only 5, the po thing.
We already have 3 kids.
No one seemed willing to offer to take in Hannah. Hannah, on the other hand, was clutching the hem of my shirt anxiously. Seeing her sad face, I made a decision. I'll take responsibility. I'll raise Hannah. Of course, I would be lying if I said I was totally okay with my decision. But I didn't want to see Hannah's sad face anymore, and out of all the relatives, she was most attached to me. The relatives worried about the difficulties of balancing work and child care, especially doing it alone. But when I expressed my intention to raise my sister's precious daughter responsibly, no more objections were raised.
Uncle Mike, are we going to live together?
Looking up at me, Hannah asked. Yes, we are. I might be unreliable, but we'll pull through together, I replied, patting her head. I decided then and there that I would do everything I could to make her happy. Our lives became hectic after that. I searched for a larger apartment for Hannah and me to live in, and we moved. I also found a daycare near our new home to replace the kindergarten she used to attend. Fortunately, we were able to transfer her to a daycare about 15 minutes from my office that had an opening. At first, Hannah cried when I dropped her off at the daycare, but gradually she got used to it. Still, the loss of her parents and the change in environment took a toll on her. She often woke up in the middle of the night crying. Each time, I gently hugged her and we fell asleep together. The hardest part was cooking. As a bachelor, I used to eat out often and was not good at cooking. But for Hannah's sake, I tried hard to cook child-friendly meals using recipe websites.
It doesn't taste like Mom's, but it's not bad.
Hannah, trying to be considerate in her own way, said. I decided to spend a lot of time with her on weekends, taking her to her favorite places like the zoo and the park. Thanks to these efforts, Hannah slowly began to smile again. But I was feeling worn out from juggling work and unfamiliar parenting duties. I had informed my office about Hannah, but I didn't want to cause them any trouble, so I often brought work home to make up for not being able to stay late. After putting Hannah to bed, I would finish my house chores and cut back on sleep to complete my work. Despite the exhaustion, I was desperate to spend more time with Hannah, who had recently started smiling again, so I worked hard every day. About 2 months of living like this passed. Then one day something happened. I had been feeling a little dizzy since the morning, but I had an important meeting scheduled first thing.
Uncle Mike, are you okay, eh? You don't seem well.
Hannah looked up at me worriedly when she woke up. I'm fine. Now, let's eat breakfast and get ready. I replied brightly and took her to the daycare. On my way to an internal meeting, I was hit by severe dizziness. The dizziness was accompanied by nausea, and I couldn't move. Luckily, my colleague, Samantha, noticed something was wrong and called for help. Thanks to her, I was taken to the company's infirmary, where the doctor told me that my dizziness was due to fatigue. I was told that my recent lack of sleep was likely the cause and was sternly warned to take care of myself even if I was busy. I knew that, but with so much to do, I couldn't help but feel frustrated. All I could do was apologize to the doctor. Since it was now lunchtime, I decided to rest in the infirmary. While resting, Samantha, who was concerned about me, visited the infirmary. As I froze up all of a sudden, I found myself apologizing. Samantha, with a look of concern on her face, began speaking.
Are you all right? I heard that you had taken in your sister's child.
Everyone in the office knew about my situation, so naturally, Samantha did too. Yeah, it's pretty tough juggling work and raising a kid on your own. I, who was completely worn down, ended up expressing my vulnerability to Samantha, who had shown concern for me. I slowly explained to Samantha how I ended up taking in my niece, Hannah, after my sister and her husband's unexpected accident. Samantha quietly listened to my story. Balancing work and childcare is hard, but I want to do my best for her. As I showed her a picture of Hannah, Samantha was slightly surprised and looked at the photo intently.
Your niece is 5 years old. That's such a cute age, isn't it?
With that comment, Samantha seemed to well up a little. I'm sorry for unloading all this on you. I'm feeling a bit better after taking a break, so let's get back to work. I hastily ended the conversation and decided to get back to work with Samantha. But when I returned to my desk, my boss suggested I take some paid time off and rest. He also advised me to go to the doctor, just in case. I felt awkward about taking time off in the middle of my work, but if I don't recover, I'll just be a burden to the company. So, I decided to take 3 days off, and Hannah was the happiest about this.
I'm so glad that Uncle Mike could pick me up early. You look so much better.
I always picked her up at the last possible moment each day, so I realized I must have made her feel lonely. Although I find my work rewarding, I began to wonder if I should consider switching jobs. Would it be better for Hannah if I chose a job that offered more flexibility with time? While pondering whether to consider changing jobs, I returned to work after my time off. During the morning meeting, I apologized to everyone for the sudden leave of absence, but my colleagues and superiors assured me not to worry. Everyone around me was so nice that I was filled with guilt. There's a sense of fulfillment in my job, but I started wondering if I had reached my limit considering the balance with child care. Feeling troubled, I spent the morning and ended up having my lunch break alone on the rooftop of the office building. Then, Samantha, who had been looking for me, showed up. And to my surprise, she said something that I didn't see coming.
You know, I've been thinking a lot since our conversation the other day. Would you let me help you out a little?
Caught off guard by Samantha's offer, I found myself lost for words. Seeing my reaction, Samantha continued speaking.
I bet it's a surprise to be asked this all of a sudden, but actually, I have a bit of a connection with your sister.
It turns out that Samantha and my sister had been following each other on Instagram. When she first joined the company, Samantha used Instagram to research popular baby items. During her research, she noticed my sister's post and decided to follow her. Thinking back, I recalled my sister really enjoyed photography after Hannah was born. Moreover, Samantha mentioned that she had been inspired by my sister's feedback for the development of a portable baby chair that won her the President's Award. Samantha saw a post from my sister saying how she wished she could easily enjoy dining out with her child, but it was always a concern whether the restaurants would have child-friendly seating. Samantha reached out to my sister via DM and even got her advice during the product development stage. Learning about the unexpected connection between Samantha and my sister left me speechless. Samantha wanted to tell me when she saw Hannah's picture the other day, but she couldn't.
Her post had stopped recently, and I never imagined that she had passed away.
Samantha spoke with a saddened expression, surprised and lost for words at my situation. Even so, I hesitated to let Samantha help with raising Hannah. I appreciate the offer, but I really can't put that on you. I tried to decline politely, but Samantha looked at me with a serious expression.
I don't just want to help because of our connection. I don't want to see you collapse again.
With that, Samantha shared her own story. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother raised her single-handedly. However, juggling work and childcare, her mother worked herself to the bone day after day. In the end, the strain became too much, and she passed away due to illness when Samantha was only 16.
I always regret not noticing something was wrong sooner. She was always smiling, pushing herself too hard. I see her in Mr. Jones every time she pushes herself too hard, she reminisced. Not that it's the only reason, but I see a lot of my mother in Mr. Jones' work. There's so much I can learn from her, and I want to continue developing useful products with her. So, please don't overwork yourself. It's okay to rely on others more. I might not be the most reliable, but please let me help.
As she looked straight at me, Samantha said this with conviction. The fact that such a competent woman praised my work made me feel both proud and embarrassed, and my face turned red. Seeing my reaction, Samantha blushed a bit, too. After a while, we both burst out laughing. Suddenly, all the energy I had been pouring into my work and raising my child seemed to evaporate. In the end, I decided to take Samantha up on her offer. After work, Samantha would stop by my house to help out. She cooked, cleaned, and was genuinely a great help. Hannah, my daughter, quickly warmed up to Samantha, who would read her storybooks and play with her. There were even times when Hannah would share secrets with Samantha that she wouldn't tell me, and they would laugh together. Initially, I had a bit of a crush on Samantha, and every day that we spent together at my house, my feelings grew stronger. I'm shy and not very good at making advances. But seeing me like this, Hannah one day asked,
"Do you like Uncle Mike, Samantha? Do you want him to always be with you?"
At Hannah's sudden question, I broke out into a sweat. I apologized and tried to brush it off, but Samantha looked straight into Hannah's eyes and said,
Yes, I do like him. I want to be with him always, if that's okay.
Samantha confessed, her face turning red with embarrassment as she looked down. Caught off guard by her confession, I bowed my head deeply and replied, "Yes, please stay with us forever." Thus began my relationship with Samantha, and somehow I was able to manage both work and raising a child. I found out later that Hannah had actually known about Samantha.
Mommy had a person she wanted to introduce to Uncle Mike. She showed me a picture.
My sister, who followed Samantha on Instagram, apparently knew we worked at the same company.
But she told me to keep it a secret because she wanted to surprise Uncle Mike when they met.
Hannah, who was now very close to Samantha, hugged her tightly and smiled brightly. Seeing how attached Hannah had become, Samantha couldn't help but smile back. I believe this happy moment is all thanks to the connection my sister made for us. I can't express how grateful I am. With that thought, I made a promise to myself to make these precious people happy from now on.
Heck, someone as incompetent and average as you becoming a surgeon, it seems the quality of doctors these days is deteriorating.
Look,
I graduated from Stanford, you know? I'm on a whole different level than you.
He said with a sneer, "This man, Johnson, is my colleague."
You should also, as a doctor, try to improve your skills a little.
After saying his piece, he left the area with a satisfied smile. Phew! He finally left. Just as I thought that, someone patted me on the shoulder.
Don't worry about him, Dr. Keith.
Betty? It was Nurse Betty who tapped me on the shoulder. She's a veteran nurse and also the head nurse who oversees all the nurses in this university hospital.
He doesn't like that you are so popular among your patients.
Huh, is that so?
Absolutely. He has a bad reputation for being cold and arrogant in his consultations, giving only sketchy explanations and not considering the patient's feelings.
Indeed, as Betty said, I have not heard much good about him, but I heard he's performed quite a number of operations.
How dare he say that? He only assists and has never been the primary surgeon. Moreover, they're all simple surgeries that any doctor should be able to do.
I gave a wry smile at her, who wrinkles her brow as she complains bitterly. The term assisting refers to the role of being the primary surgeon's first assistant. While not directly performing surgery, observing a lot of surgeries by the primary surgeon would certainly be a great learning experience. I shook my head to defend him. I also don't have much experience as a primary surgeon. As I said this, the frown on her face disappeared and a smile formed on her cheeks.
But you're doing great. You always treat your patients with a gentle and careful manner. And above all, your accurate diagnoses have led to early detections, saving many patients.
I'm only making decisions based on the situation. Hearing me say this, she puffed up her cheeks in dissatisfaction.
There you go again, your modesty. You should have more confidence.
While we were having this conversation, her pager beeped. It's a mobile phone for use in the hospital.
Oh, my pager is going off. I'll see you later.
Sure, see you? Betty told me to have more confidence, but I don't think I'm that special. Because I couldn't save the person I really wanted to save.
Keith, are you really going to be a doctor?
Yeah. I've told my parents and school. After graduating from high school, I'm going to medical school.
I wonder if you, who's afraid of blood, can do it.
I can do it. Because I looked at her lying in front of me. She was connected to various tubes and lying down. When I told her, I'll do anything to cure your illness, she gave a sad smile.
Thank you.
Without facing seriously her making such a face, I thought only of my own dream, and simple honesty said, wait for me. I'll become a doctor who can cure any injury, any illness, even your illness, and gave a big smile in return. Seeing me say that, she looked surprised, but soon a gentle smile appeared on her face.
Okay, it's a promise. Be a doctor who can save not only me but also others.
Yeah, I promise. We made a pinky promise. While making the pinky promise, she cried. She cried while laughing.
I'm happy.
Saying that, she was crying and laughing. At that time, I didn't know. With little time left, I didn't know that day would be our last. While I was lost in the last memories with her, Betty rushed over to me. What's the matter, Betty?
An emergency patient is being rushed here in an ambulance right now.
What's their condition?
They've been in a car accident. There's an exposed head wound, and they are bleeding from the abdomen. They also have a fractured right leg, and the paramedics are giving them first aid.
An exposed head wound. Their organs might be ruptured. Clear an oar. While asking her to arrange the oar, Johnson showed up.
An emergency.
After asking that, he gave me a smirk as if he was making fun of me.
You're not cut out for this. I'll do the surgery.
Thus, it was decided that Johnson would perform the surgery, and I would assist. Somehow word spread that I, who rarely performed surgeries, am going into war, and various parties from the university hospital gathered. But right now, I couldn't afford to care about who came. The patient who was hurriedly brought into the OR on a stretcher was covered in blood from both their head and abdomen, and their right leg was bent in an unnatural direction. This is terrible. Hang in there. I'll save you no matter what. Thinking that, I looked at Johnson standing next to me. Contrary to me, who wanted to save them at all costs, Johnson looked pale enough that it showed even through his mask. Dr. Johnson, when I called out to him, Johnson shook his head.
This is impossible. I didn't know it was this bad. This patient won't make it.
At his words, I felt my blood boil. They won't make it. How can you say that in front of a patient? Surprised by me, who usually don't raise my voice, Johnson fell down on his rear. Ignoring him, I let my emotions out and throw my thoughts into him. Don't decide before you try. What's the point of being a doctor if you give up so easily? There's a patient suffering right in front of us. You're not a doctor if you don't even try to save them. Johnson sat down, looking perplexed, but he kept staring into my eyes.
I'm sore.
He was probably trying to say I'm sorry. His voice was trembling. Judging that Johnson wouldn't be able to handle the current situation, I moved to where the operating surgeon stands. I'll do the surgery. When I declared that, he looked surprised.
What?
So please step aside, Dr. Johnson.
But you can't possibly do the surgery. You've only done a handful of operations. There's no way you could do such a difficult operation.
We don't have time to argue. Just step aside, Dr. Johnson. Overwhelmed by my determination, Johnson, still shaking, stood up and moved to where the spectators were. Let's get started. From that point, no one else's words reached my ears. I only listened to the necessary words.
That speed?
Of course, I didn't hear what Johnson was saying either.
He's in a different league.
At Johnson's words, one of the spectators watching in the corner responded.
You don't know
Professor.
Dr. Keith. He was top of his class at Harvard Medical School.
What, him?
Unaware of the exchange between Johnson and Professor, I only focus on the patient in front of me. I will save them. I decided that day. No matter the injury, no matter the disease, I will definitely save everyone. I promise to be that kind of doctor. So, watch me. Linda.
Dr. Keith. The patient in question is stable after surgery with no post-operative complications.
I see. That's good. Thank you, Betty. As Betty and I have this exchange, Johnson comes over with a displeased look on his face.
What the hell was that?
What do you mean? Not understanding what he meant, I tilted my head and he grabbed my collar, confronting me.
Don't play dumb. What was that? Divine skill. An ordinary person. I couldn't have saved them.
Johnson, letting go of my collar, dropped his arm down listlessly. He had a frustrated look on his face. I hadn't intended to cause such a reaction and was puzzled about what to do when Professor, who had come to observe, arrived.
I must say, that was impressive. To miraculously save someone from such a desperate situation. Truly a divine feat.
Professor was so complimentary that I blushed a little and shook my head, saying, "You're too kind, Professor." Then Johnson asked Professor a question.
Professor, you knew that he had such skills.
At that, Professor laughed out loud.
I'm the one who scouted him for this hospital. After graduating from Harvard Medical School, Dr. Keith practiced medicine in the States for 2 years. It was tough to get him to come back to Japan, but I heard he was researching a certain rare disease. We have cases of that rare disease in our university hospital, so I invited him to join us.
What? You didn't say a word about any of this.
Caught by surprise, Johnson blurted out at me, and I looked at him blankly. Well, you didn't ask.
Come on, top of your class at Harvard Medical School, scouted by Professor. Why didn't you mention any of this?
I wondered why I had to be questioned so intensely by him. After a bit of thought, I realized perhaps educational background and career history are important to him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made a point of mentioning that he graduated from Stanford University. So, I said to him, titles, that sort of thing doesn't matter to me. I want to save as many people as possible. That's all. Even after hearing this, he was still unsatisfied.
Then why? Why don't you do more surgeries as the primary surgeon?
Well, his question was certainly fair. As I struggled for an answer, Professor stepped in to explain on my behalf.
That's because Dr. Keith is operating on patients that only he can save. Although he has done fewer surgeries as the primary surgeon, each one was a severe and challenging case. But Dr. Keith managed to save them all.
Upon hearing that, Johnson began to tremble.
So you're telling me I'm not good enough to be on call for serious cases?
Professor, completely unfazed by Johnson's reaction, responded cheerfully, well, that's about right. After all, you weren't even able to perform surgery on that patient without falling flat on your butt, were you? Oh no. With that response, Johnson is only going to get angrier. Sure enough, glancing at Johnson, his face was as red as a tomato, looking like he might blow a gasket any second. But Professor just kept going, completely disregarding Johnson's state.
Dr. Keith is an excellent physician, and you, Johnson, are not entirely hopeless. You just need to work hard and strive to be like him.
With that, Professor said, I will take my leave, and walked away. Left behind were only myself, Betty, and Johnson. Johnson, looking awkward, as if he was recalling his earlier rudeness. Betty, however, oblivious to Johnson's discomfort, gave me a hearty pat on the shoulder.
Whoa, Dr. Keith, you graduated from Harvard Medical School, and you were top of your class.
Yes, well, it's nothing to boast about, really.
What are you talking about? It's definitely something to be proud of. It's way more impressive than any local university. No wonder your diagnoses are always spot on. I'm going to keep relying on you, Dr. Keith.
With that, she started hitting my back again. Once she finished thumping my back, she turned to Johnson and said, you should follow Dr. Keith's example, too, Dr. Johnson. Even Professor said you're not completely hopeless. Try harder. Betty, she's fearlessly straightforward. Even with his head down, I could almost feel the murderous aura emanating from Johnson.
Well, I have to go check on some patients now. Bye.
After Betty left, a low growl, lower than usual, came from Johnson. The voice was so deep that I let out a startled, whoa. Then, he turned towards me and pointed his finger sharply.
I won't lose to you, got that? I'll become such a good doctor that they won't need to call on you for surgeries.
Having said his piece, he stormed off, looking fired up. Seeing his determination made me chuckle. Well, as long as he's motivated, I need to keep doing my best, too. With that thought, I headed towards the examination room I was assigned to. Fast forward 3 years, I managed to establish a treatment for a particular difficult disease. It was the same disease that had taken Linda, my former girlfriend, from this world. I did it, Linda. Finally, I can help people suffering from the same disease as you. I really can save everyone now. Finally, all my hard work is being rewarded.
Dr. Keith, this research paper, it's undoubtedly going to change the world, and you'll be swamped with patients wanting you to operate on them. You'll hardly have a moment to rest. Are you sure you're okay with that?
When asked by Professor, I nodded without hesitation. That's why I became a doctor. I am Keith, a Harvard Medical School graduate with first-class honors. I worked as a doctor in the US for 2 years after graduation. Now, I'm back in my home country, working as a doctor at a university hospital. My motivation to become a doctor was to help people suffering from injuries and diseases. By the way, you may wonder what happened to Johnson.
He's as unpopular as ever, that Dr. Johnson.
Seeing her sighing, I asked, "What happened, Betty?"
Oh, Dr. Keith, listen to this. I had a patient complain about Dr. Johnson today.
That stuff. What was the complaint about? In the past, Johnson had often been complained about for being rude or giving sloppy explanations or not considering the patient's feelings. Is he still getting complaints? Just as I was letting out a wry smile, the words that came out of Betty's mouth were completely unexpected.
They're saying his smile is scary.
Hup, smile, scary?
Exactly. His smile is so bad, it made a child cry during a vaccination.
That's a complaint I've never heard before. Well, I said with a gentle smile, he's doing his best in his own way. I can't slack off just because I've established a treatment for Linda's rare disease. There are still many rare diseases in the world that haven't been solved yet. I want to find treatments for them as well. I have to keep doing my best to keep my promise to Linda.
Hey, are your parents coming?
I glanced at the notice of the parent-teacher meeting day when I was approached by Jessica from the seat next to me. I always looked forward to elementary school's open class day. Mom's coming to the open class day, right? I asked many times, and each time Mom said yes, I would get excited and cheer. I would look back to confirm Mom's presence in the classroom and wave with a smile. Once the class started, I was eager to answer the questions, and it felt great to be praised by Mom when I got home. When I entered middle school, having parents attend the open class day evoked mixed feelings of happiness and embarrassment. But I was always happy to see Mom's face in the classroom, showing her my shy smile when I looked back. And then there's high school's open class day. I think it's probably impossible for us. As I answered with a forced smile, Jessica responded saying, "Well, it's high school now, not many parents participate anyway," and I felt relieved. The high school I attend is known as an elite girls' school, often referred to as a posh school, with a majority of the students being middle to high school integrated program students. In such environment, I became good friends with Jessica, who, like me, had joined the school starting high school. Despite deciding to attend this school at my grandfather's recommendation, I often feel out of place here. After returning home, I would heat up some food from the fridge in the microwave, chat with Jessica and my middle school friends on text, or dig through videos on my phone when I heard the front door open.
"I'm home. Have you had dinner?"
Dad asked, and I replied yay without taking my eyes off my phone. It's been almost 2 years since we started living just the two of us. I do help out a bit, but seeing Dad try to handle both work and household chores, and trying to communicate with me more than ever since Mom's death, I can't help but think how tough it must be for him. And yet, the hole left in my heart from losing Mom just can't seem to be filled.
"By the way, there's a parent-teacher meeting next week, right?"
As Dad paused eating his meal to ask me, I felt my heart drop. When I asked how he knew, he said he checked the annual schedule. "You don't have to come. Hardly any parents come to high school's open class day anyway, and it's mostly mothers, so a dad would stand out. You wouldn't want that, right, Dad?" I thought saying this much would convince him not to come, but
"Now that your mom's gone, it's only natural for me as a father to attend the parent-teacher meeting. Plus, I'd like to see what kind of classes the teachers are conducting at school."
as I gave Dad a look, he said,
"Don't worry about work, I'll manage."
and he smiled. But that's not what I'm worried about. During lunch break, while I was chatting with Jessica in the schoolyard,
Hannah.
I was called from behind. Whoa, he really did come. I turned to look at Dad while murmuring to myself and couldn't help but burst into laughter. His knit sweater and chinos weren't bad, but I just couldn't handle his glasses and heavy bangs.
Do I look weird?
To a perplexed Dad. Nah, you're fine, I responded. After briefly introducing Dad to Jessica, since there was still time before the 5th period open class, we decided to tour the school together. Are you sure it's okay to be walking around at this time? Despite my concerns, Dad seemed carefree.
No one cares about me. Oh, here it is. I wanted to see this with you, Hannah.
Dad peered into a glass case placed in the hallway. It was filled with many trophies, shields, and photos. One of them caught my eye. It was a picture of Mom smiling with a trophy in her hands. Next to it, there was a trophy with the inscription, National High School Tennis Championship winner. My mom also graduated from this school. I've heard about the old days before, but seeing these photos and realizing that Mom was once my age feels somewhat strange.
I always thought Hannah took after me, but looking at these photos, I see traces of Susan too.
Having my dad say that made me feel a bit ticklish. Walking down the hallway towards the classroom, I see Miss Davis in my line of sight. She's a new teacher who started this year, but honestly, I'm not a fan. The reason being, she favors the students from integrated program. You can tell from her attitude and his remarks that she looks down on us high school entrants as being po. It's unbelievable for a teacher to discriminate against students like that. But she's still my homeroom teacher, so I have to greet her properly. Miss Davis, may I have a moment? As I timidly called out, Miss Davis turned around. This is my father. Dad greeted Miss Davis with a smile and thanked her for taking care of me. Miss Davis glanced at my father and quickly adjusted her glasses.
Excuse me, but do you know that today is Parent-Teacher Conference Day?
After throwing out that mocking question, she continued.
To think that you'd come to our prestigious school's Parent-Teacher Conference without a suit. How typically unsophisticated of a high school entrance parent.
Dad wasn't wearing a suit, but he wasn't dressed casually in a tracksuit or a t-shirt with jeans either. That's within the range of common sense.
Isn't it true, Miss Smith, that your family is a single-parent household? Is your father taking the day off from work?
At Miss Davis's question, I flinched.
Yes. I didn't go to work today.
My dad answered nonchalantly, causing Miss Davis to frown.
A single parent and unemployed introvert. That's just the worst.
Hearing such harsh words, my blood boiled. My dad is. Before I could say anything, Dad stopped me. Without apologizing, Miss Davis quickly left, saying that she had preparations for the conference.
It's okay, Hannah.
Despite being calmed down by Dad, I was still fuming and glared at the retreating figure of Miss Davis. When I entered the classroom, there were already several mothers present. I didn't expect so many parents to come to a high school conference. Moreover, everyone was dressed to the nines with suits or dresses and brand name bags. This private school isn't just for show. In that case, my dad stood out a bit. No, he stood out quite a lot among the parents. No one openly said anything bad, but I could see disdainful looks and whispered conversations, which upset me. Seeing the parents' reactions and smirking as if to say I told you so made me most angry at Miss Davis. Then, class started. Miss Davis called on me twice, but because I answered perfectly each time, she looked frustrated, which made me feel better. Near the end of class, noisy footsteps echoed from the hallway. Our school rules are strict, and running in the hallway, especially during class, is an unacceptable act. Everyone looked puzzled, wondering who could be running, when the classroom door swung open. It was the principal.
Acting Chairman, you have an urgent call.
In a flustered manner, he yelled towards the back of the room. The students, including me, turned around, and the parents looked at each other. Then, Dad let out a sigh.
Goodness, I was trying not to be recognized by disguising myself, but this makes it pointless.
Apologizing to the principal, he walked towards him and left the classroom together. As soon as he left, the classroom erupted into chaos.
Ho, whose dad is that just now?
The acting chairman, it's him.
In the midst of the commotion stirred by the classmates who were with us since middle school, Jessica whispers to me secretly.
Hannah's dad. He was the acting chairman all along.
Sorry, I didn't tell you. I still can't quite believe that my dad is now the acting chairman of this school. After all, he was just a regular office worker until recently.
I apologize for causing such a commotion.
My dad, who had returned to the classroom, bows his head. The attitudes of the mothers had completely changed, and they were now offering polite smiles to my dad. It's just so typical of them. After class, Miss Davis bowed deeply to my dad.
I was not aware that Mr. Smith was the acting chairman. I am terribly sorry.
The gaze of not only the students, but also the parents, is gathered in unison. We, the students, have to leave school because there is a meeting after this. Let me know what happened later. Leaving these words to my dad, I left the classroom. Later, I heard from my dad about the meeting. Miss Davis confessed to the parents that she had been favoring the students who have been with her since middle school, and apologized. On top of that, she talked about his past. Miss Davis's father was a heavy drinker who loved to gamble and hardly worked. Her mother, fed up with her husband, left home, leaving the children behind. Miss Davis took care of her younger sister while doing housework, struggled to go to college, and obtained a teaching license. After getting a job, she left his father's house and is now supporting her sister, who is preparing for high school entrance exams.
I've been living with my pride intact by identifying myself with single-parent and po people and despising them.
Hearing Miss Davis's confession, I felt a pain in my heart. I always thought she was full of confidence and probably had walked the elite path, so I didn't know she had such a tragic past. After her self-introduction, my dad introduced himself again as the acting chairman.
I'm still new and inexperienced in the role of acting chairman, so I would appreciate your help. If there are things you want to improve or points of concern, please feel free to consult with me.
My dad becoming the acting chairman was triggered by the death of my mom. The school I attend is run by my grandfather as chairman, but I had never met my grandfather or even knew of his existence until my mom passed away. That's because my grandfather opposed my mom's marriage to my dad, and they eloped. When my mom died from an illness when I was in 8th grade, I met my grandfather for the first time at the funeral. My mom had continued to send letters to my grandfather even after she was disowned, and he knew about me through photos. My grandfather said that he had forgiven my mom and dad, but his pride had prevented him from going to see them.
I'm sorry, Susan. If only I had come to see you earlier.
My grandfather apologized to my dad and me and asked us to become a family.
Of course, I'm sure Susan is happy in heaven too.
My dad gladly accepted, and even though I was sad to lose my mom, I was happy to know I had a grandfather. I was just about to prepare for high school entrance exams, and at my grandfather's suggestion, I decided to apply to the current school. Not only that, my grandfather asked my dad to succeed him, and my dad, after much deliberation, quit his job and became the acting chairman. I didn't want to be treated special as the granddaughter of the chairman and the daughter of the acting chairman, so I kept it a secret from my classmates. That's why my dad disguised himself at the class observation so the teachers and staff wouldn't find out. Miss Davis was new and had only exchanged brief greetings with my dad once, so he probably didn't recognize him. Only the principal was told that my dad would be attending his daughter's class observation, but my dad chuckled, saying he didn't think it would turn into such a situation. After that, my dad established a grant scholarship system for single-parent households. And to Miss Davis.
Why don't you let your sister try taking the entrance exam for our school?
He made such a proposal. As a result, Miss Davis's sister passed. She was able to apply for and receive a scholarship. Later, Miss Davis came with his sister to thank me.
Even though I was so rude, you thought of us and I don't know how to thank you. Thank you very much.
At that point, my dad confessed his past.
Actually, I also came from a single-parent, impoverished family and had to struggle. I had to get a job right out of high school to support my siblings. So, when I heard your story, I thought I wanted to give children from single-parent and poor families the chance to further their education.
My dad, who was a post-single parent and a high school graduate, was opposed to getting married by my grandfather. But now he seems to be doing well, having learned the job from grandfather. Ever since then, Miss Davis's attitude towards her students changed. She no longer exhibited discriminatory behavior or remarks, and began to sincerely interact with each and every student. I was surprised to find myself liking a teacher I used to dislike so much. Today is our regular weekly dinner. Eating at a fancy restaurant still feels unfamiliar, but I'm getting used to spending this time talking around the table with grandfather and dad. Grandfather wants to know everything that happened while we were apart, no matter how trivial, so the conversation never ends. Sometimes, grandfather and dad would discuss school management.
I guess this conversation is pretty boring. Sorry, Hannah.
I smiled at grandfather's apology. Not at all. After all, I'm thinking about wanting to support you and dad in the future. Grandfather teared up a bit, saying, "That's very kind of you. But you should pursue the path you want to take, Hannah." It didn't sound persuasive at all.
That's right. The thing that makes us happiest is knowing that you're doing well, Hannah.
Thinking of Mom, I felt a warmth welling up inside my eyes. The loneliness of losing Mom will always be there. But I'll be all right because I have a family who loves me. I will also set clear future goals for the sake of these two.
I lost my dad to an illness when I was 10 years old. From then on, my mom single-handedly ran the restaurant which my parents used to manage and supported me all the way through college. Thanks to her hard work, bubbly personality, and top-notch home-cooked meals, the restaurant thrived. Despite being a single-parent family, I was able to grow up in a very privileged environment. I think it helped me grow up to be a generous and positive person. I have many friends, and I was blessed with good interpersonal relationships and led fulfilling days even after graduating college and joining a major beer company. Except, that is, for my relationship with one of my boss, Mr. Smith, who worked in the same department. Mr. Smith, 3 years older, was highly competent at his work and trusted by our superiors. Initially, he was strict but gave me precise guidance. However, recently his attitude towards me has been so harsh that I've begun to think he dislikes me personally. My friend and colleague, Williams, told me not to worry about it, but it did bother me because not being used to being disliked by people. I wanted to somehow mend our relationship, but I had no idea how to deal with it because I didn't know the cause. After a while, a major company-wide project was launched. A new team was announced from our department, consisting of Mr. Smith, Williams, and myself. Mr. Smith is the team leader. We, both Williams and I, who were in our 3rd year with the company, were delighted that it was a great opportunity, although the fact that Mr. Smith was the leader was a concern for me.
Don't worry, Mr. Smith is strict, but he's good at his work and not unreasonable. Now that we're on the same team, we'll be working together more often, so this could be a chance for you to get along better. Think of it as a chance to show him what you're made of.
Reassured by Williams's bright words, I nodded in agreement. I didn't know what had made me fall out of favor with him, but the more time we spent together, the more opportunities we would have to understand each other. With that in mind, I resolved to do my best at work. However, Mr. Smith's attitude remained unchanged. As Williams had said, he never got angry or ignored me for unreasonable reasons, but more often than not, he would not listen to me when I spoke up in meetings. Of course, I knew I was inexperienced, but it was tough to be constantly denied without receiving any precise instructions or advice. Everyone was working late every day and exhausted, but Mr. Smith was particularly hard-working. It might be natural as he was the leader, but he tried to do everything by himself. He didn't rely on others, or rather, he didn't seem to trust them. He worked overtime more than anyone else, and it was a given for him to work on his days off. I was a little worried about him, who was growing more and more fatigued by the day. One day, I had a long meeting with a client and returned to the office quite late to find Mr. Smith working overtime alone. If you don't mind, I can help you a bit with that. I pointed to a pile of documents on his desk. It was already past 10 p.m. Everyone else had gone home long ago, and only Mr. Smith was left in the room. Even when I offered to help, he just said without taking his eyes off his computer, "I'm fine. You can go home." But haven't you been working overtime every day recently, Mr. Smith? You don't look well either. You should go home early and rest sometimes. I just need to input these, right? As I reached out for the documents, he suddenly shouted, "I told you I'm fine. Don't touch them."
Just do what you're supposed to do. Stop trying to please everyone.
Caught off guard by his harsh words, I felt more anger than surprise. I don't like conflicts, but this time I couldn't help but retort. Why do I have to be spoken to like this? All I said was that I'd help, right? I could feel my blood boiling, but I couldn't hold back. Maybe I was letting out some pent-up frustration.
That's exactly what's annoying. I can't stand how you're always trying to play the good guy. Just go home already.
With that, Mr. Smith didn't even look at me. For a moment, I thought about punching him, but decided against it. It was ridiculous. I was disgusted with myself for wanting to get along with such a person. I grabbed my bag without a word and quickly left the room. My apartment is only a 10-minute bike ride from the office, but I didn't want to go back to an empty room, so I got on the train. I felt like I needed a drink. After about 20 minutes on the train, I walked into my mom's restaurant, which I hadn't visited in a while.
Well, this is a surprise.
Saying that, she smiled at me from behind the counter. There was only one male customer at the end of the bar.
I haven't seen you around lately. I was wondering how you were doing. Been busy with work?
She placed a cold bottle of beer in front of me. Ever since I started working and living alone, I would drop by here twice a week for dinner, but I've been too busy to visit lately. Yay, kind of busy, I said softly, poured the beer into the glass and gulped it down in one go. As I sighed, I continued to pour the beer.
What's the matter? Drowning your sorrows?
She is as sharp as ever. She placed appetizers in front of me and began frying something. Appetizers are homemade pickles and cheese platters. The homemade pickles, which I hadn't had in a long time, eased my tense emotions. Maybe I had let my guard down, but I suddenly started to feel drunk. My colleague's been picking on me for no reason. Power harassment. I accidentally started to grumble. I got up, went behind the counter, grabbed a bottle of beer, and returned to my seat.
Don't you think you might have said something unnecessary without realizing it? You do have a knack for lacking tact, Jake.
You could call it being open-hearted. As I said that, she chuckled, ha ha ha, and placed Caesar salad and French fries on the counter. The fragrant aroma tickled my nostrils, and I started eating. While eating, I told her about my relationship with Mr. Smith and what had happened that night. She just quietly listened to me. After I had finished talking, she served me a cup of coffee.
I see. In other words, you're not liked, is that it?
Well, yes, I don't know why, but it's affecting my work, and I want him to stop. It's like being bullied as a kid.
There might not be a reason. Maybe he just dislikes your face.
Just when I thought, what? The man sitting at the counter chuckled.
Sorry for interrupting. You really are funny.
The man who had turned to look at us was around 60 years old. Dressed in a high-quality suit, his gentle smile emanated an aura of dignity.
Oh, I apologize for letting you hear such trivial talk.
She served the man a cup of coffee. While thinking that it wasn't trivial at all, I lightly bowed to the man.
I might be sticking my nose in where it doesn't belong, but may I say something?
I nodded. Yeah?
That colleague, he might not hate you, but he might get a thing for you. You know how little boys pull the hair of the girls they like, right? That's what it feels like. I just couldn't help but think that.
I said again, yeah? He gets a thing for me. What's that about? Not that he could hear my inner voice, but the man laughed heartily and said, of course, I mean as a person. Like he can't stop thinking about you. It might be good to have an honest talk. You might get an unexpected answer. With that, the man stood up saying, check, please, and left the place with a smile, saying, sorry for saying unnecessary things. I'll come again. He was a mysterious man. Just having exchanged a few words with him, his words had settled in my heart. When I asked my mom who he was, she said she didn't know because he was just someone who occasionally came in just before closing time and they hadn't really talked about much. Sometime after that, it was decided that our team would entertain clients. Although the clients were all young and we were looking for a place where we could let loose and eat and drink to our heart's content, Mr. Smith asked, does anyone know a good place? I hesitated a bit, but then boldly suggested, how about my mother's restaurant? My mother runs a restaurant. It's a small place with a counter as the main area, but I guarantee the taste of the food. We can rent out the whole place, so you can make as much noise as you want, and it will be a lot cheaper. After saying this, Mr. Smith looked at me and said, oh.
Can we count on you then?
With that said, he gave me a grin. Seeing his smile made me happy, and I found myself responding like an elementary school kid, yes. I immediately called my mom and informed her of the date and the number of guests. When I mentioned that Mr. Smith would also be coming, she exclaimed in excitement, really?
Well, then I'll do my best to make up for my son's incompetence.
I'm not that incompetent. With that, I ended the call. The sound of her delighted voice lingered in my ear. Back when I was a student, I would often take my friends to her restaurant, but since becoming a working adult, I hadn't taken anyone. I wonder if this counts as being a dutiful son. The thought made me happy. Fast forward to the day of the banquet, a week later. Around noon, I was summoned by Mr. Smith.
The department head from the other party will be joining us tonight. I'm sorry, but we'll have to cancel at your mother's place.
With that casual remark, I was thrown into a state of panic. We were preparing for a party of almost 20 people. My mom would have been busy preparing since the morning. Cancel, you said.
With the department head joining us, we can't be seen at a grungy small restaurant, can we? I'll book a fancier place. Sorry for the trouble.
With that, Mr. Smith returned to his work. His description of the place as grungy stung. Was he saying that my mother's restaurant was grungy? How condescending. I wanted to complain, but I took out my smartphone to make the cancellation call to my mom. After explaining the situation, my mom brightly said, well, that's life. However, her voice betrayed her disappointment. I apologized profusely before hanging up the call. Recalling Mr. Smith's attitude made me clench my smartphone tightly. I was frustrated. I couldn't forgive him for hurting not me, but my mom. Not wanting to see Mr. Smith's face, I decided to head out. As I was visiting a few clients, my phone rang. It was my mom.
Do you remember the customer who was sitting at the counter when you came last time? His name is Mr. Bob, and he called. He wants to book the place for tonight. It's a bit sudden, but at least the preparations won't go to waste. I thought you might be worried, so I'm reporting it to you.
Hearing her cheerful voice, I felt relieved. That's good. Once I finish my work, I'll come over to help.
What? But don't you have a business dinner tonight?
I'm not going to that. I ended the call. I had no intention of attending tonight's business dinner. Even if I were to be called childish, I didn't care. Just for today, I didn't want to listen to what Mr. Smith had to say. Knowing that the reservation was for 7 p.m., I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes earlier, put on an apron like the one my dad used to wear, and started helping out. I was used to helping my mom during busy times since I was a kid. As I was arranging appetizers, time flew by, and before I knew it, the sound of the sliding door opening echoed through the restaurant.
Welcome.
As my mom loudly greeted, "Good evening," Mr. Bob walked in.
Sorry for the sudden request. My client said he wanted to treat us, so I thought I'd love to have your home-cooked meals. I've brought some young folks with me, so please feed us till they're full.
Following him, the guests started to come in one after the other, and among them, to my surprise, was Mr. Smith. I was so surprised that I let out a no. Without thinking, Mr. Smith was looking at me, his eyes wide with surprise.
What? Is that you, Jake? Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be helping out at your mom's restaurant today?
It was Williams who spoke up. The rest of the crew looked at me, surprised to see me in an apron.
Wait, your mom's place is this place. But I thought you said you canceled the reservations.
He looked over at Mr. Smith after saying that. An awkward silence filled the room for a moment.
Well, everyone, please have a seat. How about you start with a beer? Jake, don't just stand there, get the beer.
She, sensing something, cheerfully stepped behind the counter after saying this. Mr. Bob took a brief glance at me, didn't say anything, and took his seat. Mr. Smith also sat next to him. Dishes piled high on large plates kept coming out, and the beer kept flowing. After about an hour of work, my mom said, "You're done now. Go have a drink." I took off my apron and was about to join Williams and the others at their table when Mr. Smith stopped me as I came out from behind the counter. He handed me a bottle of beer, urging me to drink. Without a word, I sat down next to him and poured the beer into my glass.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Smith bowed his head to me, nearly making me spit out my beer. If it's about the reservation cancellation, don't worry about it. I was shocked to find out that Mr. Bob is the head client, but well, all's well that ends well. Even though there was still some lingering awkwardness, he bowed his head so deeply that I thought it was fine in the end. I'm not one to hold a grudge. Seeing me like this, Mr. Smith gave a small laugh and said, "That's the part of you I struggled with."
I'm sorry not just for the cancellation, but also for my attitude towards you. I was jealous of you, and it's embarrassing to admit.
He took a swig of his beer. Jealous? I didn't understand what he was talking about, so I kept quiet and waited for him to continue.
You're really straightforward, Jake. You're not the type to hold on to negative feelings for a long time. That's too bright for someone like me. When I look at you, it reminds me of how small and petty I am.
Even after all that, I still didn't understand what he was talking about. My confusion must have shown on my face, because he looked at me and laughed.
Sorry, it's probably hard for you to understand. In short, I was jealous of you. I grew up in a single-parent household too, and my mom ran a small diner to support me. I was bullied a lot as a kid because of it, and when I grew up, I thought I was going to make everyone who bullied me pay. I didn't make any friends and I fought my way to where I am now. When I saw your background, I felt a strange kinship because we had similar experiences. But unlike me, you had no twisted pots. It surprised me, even though we were raised in similar environments. How could you be so ridiculously straight-laced?
Even though he called me ridiculous, I didn't get angry. I refilled his glass, then my own.
You're uncomplicated, not twisted or seeing others as enemies like me. It oddly annoyed me. How could you live so straight, even though you were raised in the same kind of environment as me? I wanted to live like you. You were like an ideal vision. You were the person I wanted to be but couldn't. I was taking out my frustrations on you. I was too hard on you, more than necessary. As a leader and as a person, I was terrible. I'm sorry.
He bowed his head deeply once again. Not knowing what to say, I just stared blankly. Then Mr. Bob came over with a glass in his hand and sat down next to Mr. Smith.
So you were the first to reserve this place. Then you canceled, and unknowingly I rebooked it. Things have a way of falling into place in the end, don't they?
He said this with a gentle smile. My mom was behind the counter, smiling at Mr. Smith and me.
I'm truly sorry for just canceling the reservation so casually.
Mr. Smith apologized to my mom. She, shaking her head with a smile, said, "He's still a bit immature, but I hope you can continue to get along. Please come for dinner again. We'll always be waiting for you." And she bowed her head.
It's a wonderful thing, being human. Because we have words, we can easily convey our thoughts. It's a waste to hold back. Say what you think. It'll make you feel much better.
He patted Mr. Smith's shoulder a couple of times as he said this. Mr. Smith gave a shy nod, then clanked his glass against mine, saying, "I'm counting on you." After that, Mr. Smith remained as tough as ever. But I wasn't about to lose either. Whenever he voiced his opinions, I shot back with my own. Whether it was thanks to that or not, our team, Mr. Smith and I, started to produce better results, and we were paired up more and more often because of it.
That's why I say you're being too soft,
he said, slamming his glass down on the counter. It's not being soft, it's compromising. Chasing only immediate gains is your bad habit, isn't it? I've told you that many times.
What did you say?
As we glared at each other, we could hear my mom's hearty laughter in the background.
You two bicker like brothers.
Feeling embarrassed, we both turned away. Since that day, Mr. Smith and I had been drinking together at my mom's restaurant. We were always arguing, but somehow we had become friends.
Still at it, I see.
The man who slid open the door was Mr. Bob. He had become a regular at this restaurant and would naturally take a seat next to us whenever Mr. Smith and I were there.
Welcome, Mr. Bob. You're like the dignified father to my mischievous sons.
My mom said that, and Mr. Bob laughed.